All right, welcome to the Known Experience podcast. Once again, I'm John. I'm here with Sean, and our guest today is Ricky Aiken, coming to us from the 561 West Palm Beach, Florida. How's it going, Ricky?
I'm happy, man. Super excited to finally be doing this podcast with y'all, and I'm ready to get into it.
I think John, he laid a really poor foundation for us to kick this off. He reheated his K-Cup coffee before we launched into this. So if there's any mistakes, if he fumbles a lot, it's just because that's how he chose to start this podcast. I just want to clarify.
Sean is a coffee shop owner and roaster, and today I chose violence by telling him that I was reheating a K-Cup coffee to start this. But Ricky's in West Palm, which is where Sean and I both used to live. I actually used to live right down the street from you, Ricky, at Palm Beach Lakes, about a quarter mile from Tamarind. Shout out to Hook's Fish.
Yes.
Best fried fish on the planet. But let's go on to Sean. Why don't you tell us how you know Ricky? And Ricky, you can tell us what you do.
Yeah, Ricky was introduced to my life about 9 years ago. We were both new to the city leadership scene. I was interested in affecting change, creating transparency in the lines of communication, and just looking for people that weren't of the system. And Ricky was one of those new guys as well, really trying to get into local politics to affect change. And I just loved his bravery, and so I've always respected him. He's one of those people that really puts his money where his mouth is at a high personal cost over the years. And obviously, he deals with young men from his neighborhood, so I thought he'd be a perfect guest for our podcast. But Ricky, welcome, man. Give us the short on what you do.
All right. Well, my name is Ricky Aiken. I'm a founder and executive director of a youth delinquency and gun violence prevention agency called Inner City Innovators. And we're most known for our Hope Dealer mentoring program. So if you're ever in West Palm Beach and you see these Hope Dealer shirts worn by people, it's in support of our fight to end gun violence, not just in West Palm Beach, but throughout Palm Beach County. And I want to add this before going in, that when Sean left, it's as if he took a huge piece of the soul of the city with him. Because I often imagine, when I started this organization 8 or 9 years ago, it was an entire different place, but it was conducive to someone like me stepping up to provide leadership on the situation that seemed perilous at the time. And for those of you who don't know me, I was born to a crack addicted mother, raised by a grandmother who struggled with alcoholism, and a very emotionally tumultuous situation. My grandmother had 7 children. All 7 of her children struggled with some form of addiction, rather drugs or alcohol, and all of them succumbed to poverty, And my mother had 4 boys, of which I'm the third. Both of my older brothers, dropped out of school to pursue the drug trade because they thought that was a way that they could at least bring some kind of support to our home at the time. So for me growing up, looking at my family dynamics, I always felt like the choices I had in life were too predetermined. I was either going to end up on drugs like my mother and her siblings, or I was going to end up selling it like my older brothers. And when you grow up in a community like mine, no one's telling you to drop out of school or to do some of the negative things that you end up doing to kind of make a way. But it's almost as if society kind of pigeonholes you into thinking that that's the only option left. But lucky for me, man, I have mentors that came into my life and really believed in me before I ever had the courage to believe in myself. Guys like Todd Shoemaker, Michael Newsom, Brother Carl, Chris Trash at Urban Youth Impact, and guys like that just really took an interest in me and really built me up spiritually. And that was kind of the foundation that would kind of guide. I basically dropped out of high school in 11th grade. And as I said before, when you're growing up in a community like this, there's really when I hear people use words like gangs, I feel like it's an overstatement for what happens here. It's really just a group of young men that are trying to make sense of their environment, that are trying to protect themselves and find a way to provide some kind of security in a very insecure environment. So me and my friends and the things that we were doing would progressively become more and more dangerous, So by that 11th grade year, I was being shot at. I was losing friends to gun violence. I'm selling drugs. Like I'm on the path that my older brothers were on. But like I said before, thanks to these mentors, I was kind of given a second chance at life. I eventually went back, got my GED, graduated from EMT school because I thought I wanted to become a fireman. And I took a job at Urban Youth Impact that it was kind of the foundation of the love I have for the young people in my community now. Because when I was working as a mentor in that organization, when these kids saw me, they didn't see my past. They didn't see my imperfections. They didn't see all the wrong things I did. They saw me for who I could be. They saw me as a role model, as a big brother, as a mentor. And that was the seed that was planted that you fast forward to 2015 when I start Inner City Innovators. West Palm Beach is experiencing one of its deadliest years on record. And I remember standing with my cousin Terry. He had been shot before, went to prison. He was out now. I got him a job at Urban Youth. And we were watching the news and kind of lamenting the fact that every day in 2015, we're looking at the news and someone we knew was either killed or there were whispers in the community of someone we knew actually committing a murder, right? And we kind of were thinking why is no one that's from the community doing anything about this? You watch the news and you see commissioners and the mayor talk about all they're going to do to address the situation, but you saw that there was no real community buy-in. And in a situation like this, community buy-in is everything. So we organized a small group of our friends and just started attending community forums, city commission meetings, and sharing our perspectives and our experiences on why this gun violence was happening. And one community forum in particular, there was a young man with us. His name was Johnny Davis. I was always the spokesman, so we would kind of brainstorm. I would go up and share. And after a community forum, a news reporter, Michelle Posada, local news reporter at WPTV at the time, she thought it was remarkable that a group of young men from the community were using their voice and wanting to do something. So she wanted to do a news story that day. And I remember we told her to meet us on Tamarind Avenue, and I had Johnny in the car with me. And I remember telling Johnny, because it was all potential at that point. I never knew that what we were doing could lead to what it's become. But I remember telling Johnny, man, whatever this is that we're building, that it's for you and your peers, bro. Because he was 19 years old, had just finished school, had a baby on the way, and was contemplating going into the military. And so I remember him smiling and really understanding what we were trying to do and using our life experiences this way. And so we do the news story, it airs, it was an exciting time. But a week and a half later, I was at work. And by this time, I was working at Children's Home Society of Florida. I just clocked into work and I get a phone call around 3:30. And I was someone telling me that Johnny was walking home from the store with a group of his friends and he was gunned down in a drive-by shooting. And, that was devastating because here we had a young man that in his young life understood, the dynamics of the violence in our community and wanted to use his voice for change and wanted to be an example to his peers. And a week and a half later, he's lifeless in those very streets. And it was that incident that showed us that what we were doing, it had to move past helping city leaders form solutions to us as young men from the community, doing everything we could to ensure that what happened to Johnny Davis didn't continue to happen to other young men. So we organized a peace march in honor of Johnny. Between 100 and 150 people showed up, including city leaders, commissioners, state senators, and our community was there. And I remember that day of this peace march making a promise to my community that the days were over, that we sat idle as our young men continued to kill and be killed and lose their life in such violent ways. And everything we've built since then has been kind of a fulfillment of that promise. The Inner City Innovators, we try to do a few things well, and those few things are really focusing our efforts on the highest risk young men, the young men who are most likely to perpetrate and be victimized. And so the three programs that we do that I really think make us effective, they're all built on intuition, what I felt like I needed at that time in my life. And not only that, everything we built is built on the foundation that the young men who kind of go through our programs can lead these initiatives on their own. And the most important being our Hope Dealer Mentoring Program, which is a hybrid mentoring program that really focuses on community leadership development, social emotional learning, and community service. Another program is our community engagements, where we organize any community event that's going to awaken our community to the threat of violence that our young men face. Homicide, right? Not car accidents, not drug overdoses, murder. And 9 times out of 10, that murder happening at the hands of someone that looks like the young man being murdered is the #1 cause of death for young Black males growing up in communities like ours. So anything we can do to kind of let people know, because, our community's been going through this so long, we're traumatized people. And when you've seen as much violence as we've seen, you become kind of apathetic to it. So whatever we can do to kind of break that apathy and pull people into this fight, that's what our community engagements are focused on. And the most important arm of that is our violence response team. Anytime there's a homicide involving a youth, we respond in hopes of stemming the tides of retaliation. And lastly is our anti-violence workshops, which is an outward focused thing where we're going to schools, elementary schools, middle schools, churches, community centers, any agency working with young people growing up in the community of concentrated violence. We go in and we teach those young people protective factors and risk factors and hope that they'll do what it takes to keep themselves out of harm's way. So, like I said, man, everything we do is kind of built out of the luck I had in escaping the plights of my community, but not just escaping, trying to find out what we can do that could engage the least common denominator and enlist them in the fight to end something that's been destroying lives in our community for far too long.
Wow. I've asked this, and I think the answer is always unique for whoever we're interviewing, but the statistics say that men, women that grow up in an environment like you did will perpetuate generally, right? What was it about you? You said you had mentors, but was it a gradual enlightenment to I actually do have the power to change my life? Or was it a moment? Was it what was it for you that said, I actually don't want this life and I want better, not only for me, but for my community? What did that process look like as a young man?
For me, I would really have to point it to my faith, right? At that time, I had nothing, man. Like, I really felt like I was just floating into the footsteps of my older brothers, and a lot of unfortunate cases that like I had seen in the community with older guys. And I really felt like I was powerless to resist it, because when you're in this situation, like it's so normal, the dysfunctions you see day in and day out, and some of the ways of being that are just detrimental to human development. It wasn't until, I met Jesus, and kind of seeing that if like that there was grace for me, that I could be forgiven, that all my past could be behind me, and that I could be given a new life, a new start. And also the contextualization that it gave me, right? To kind of the righteousness from the unrighteous. And it kind of gave me a framework of understanding of kind of disassociating myself with some of my peers, where it was really like, as much as I love my friends, like these were my brothers, man. Like we had gone through hell and back for each other. But almost every time I was with them, I was under the threat of gun violence, right? We couldn't even hang out and just be at ease without the threat of thinking that car coming up the street could be someone coming to exact revenge on someone in the group, you know? So, I wasn't there to be a part of that. It was just, it's a part of their environment, Nowhere else in America is a group of people under threat to be murdered, like young Black men who just hang out together in their community, right? You go to a white neighborhood, kids can skateboard, walk around, and really enjoy being a teenager. But in communities like ours, there's a blade hanging over our neck at every instance. So it was the contextualization that my faith gave me that gave me really the courage, the verbiage, the framework to kind of separate myself from my friends and really take advantage of the opportunities around me. And it was a gradual process. I remember I was probably 16 or 17. My grandma had passed away. I was back with my mom, and me, my mom, and my little brother found shelter in a shed. behind an abandoned house. They had no running water, running electric. We steal electric from the house next to us or extension cord so that we can like turn on a lamp and stuff like that. And my mom slept in this old laundry room with a sheet over it. So my little brother and I had the space with the door on it. But that was normal. You know, I didn't see that. It was just like we were evicted from the housing projects because my brother was caught selling drugs there. So this is where we had to live now. But I remember one night I was out smoking weed with my friends, and somehow I come back to the shed, and my mom and my little brother were arguing. And it was like for the first time I saw my life for what it was. Like the thoughts were like, he shouldn't be talking to our mom like that. My mom shouldn't be choosing drugs over raising us. We shouldn't be living in a shed. I shouldn't be selling drugs. I should be in school, right? For the first time in my life, I saw where my life was headed. And that was kind of the turning point for me that I really started to take advantage of the relationships I had at Urban Youth Impact. And like I said, I was able to get my GED, graduate from EMT school, and more so start surrounding myself with people who have my best interest in mind and who can pull levers that I need to pull that I couldn't pull myself to create an opportunity for me. And so it was a long road. I wish it was easy, but every stumble along the way, I could say was a stumble forward. And the most important thing this all did was it helped me process, right? You know, it was a very therapeutic environment where people were helping reorient me to an environment that I had known all my life. And I was really able to see it for what it was. And once you see it for what it is, it's like the Matrix, right? When they woke Neo up and they showed him that he's been living in this program. And once you're open to that, like it's very hard to go back into that. And so ever since that moment, you know, I had other epiphany that was huge as well. You know, I would after work, I would go to a Barnes and Nobles. I remember my first time walking inside. I'm seeing all these books on all these different topics. And I had an epiphany like, man, anything a person wants to know, they can just come sit in here and learn it, right? And so I would go in there and just learn about my community and the things that contributed to the way it was. And having one book I read, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, I developed a personal mission statement. I just became really intentional about using what I had. A lot of times when you grow up in a place like this, you're often told like that what you've gone through or where you're born or the color of your skin determines where you'll end up in life, right? So you're kind of passive. You feel like you have no control. And reading this book kind of shifted my paradigm, right? I may not have what a kid growing up in middle class America that has two loving parents has, right? But what do I have, right? Luckily, I can read, and through sharing my story and testimony at church, I realized I had ability to speak. I had to use whatever it was I had. And I think that was a foundation, some early precursors that would kind of cultivate the man I am today to do the things that I do.
Yeah, Ricky, I think there's so much we want to learn from you today and hear from you, from your perspective, because this issue of violence and gun violence is everyone's aware of it. Like if you turn on the news at all, you're aware of it, right? If you pay attention at all. Most of us are aware of it from a distance, and you're on the front lines. You just shared when you first started dreaming about this, you know, the young man that you're dreaming with gets gunned down. And then a couple months ago, we were supposed to record this podcast. And literally the day before we're supposed to record a podcast with you about gun violence, your niece is gunned down. We're so sorry. I mean, when I saw that, I was just grieved, like of all the people for this to happen to.
Yeah.
How do you process that? I mean, living in the midst of that, it hitting your life very close and very real. How do you process that?
Yeah. One thing I've had to remind myself, right? We live in a world where, you know, we see evil and we see things that happen every day. You know, we're confronted with it on the news or anywhere. And sometimes, you know, I don't know what leads to it, but we kind of think ourselves removed from those kind of sufferings. And one thing I'm big into Stoic philosophy, the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, always with me. And one thing, I've derived from my learning, that is that if it's on the table for anyone, it's on the table for me. And so when things this tragic happen, the heartbreak or the thing that get let the trauma linger longer than it should is the obsessive thought of why did this happen? And you're playing out all these alternate scenarios. I think the thing that I had to come to terms with first is that it happened, right? And the tragedy isn't that she died. If there's any tragedy in it, it's how she died and how old she was when she died. But as I said before, when we consider the fact that none of us are guaranteed a long life, there are people dying at young ages all around us all the time. Uh, Quite often, it kind of even removes this thing from that, and it kind of reminds me that we need to be appreciative of every moment that we have above ground and with our family members in this life. But the thing that has helped me more than anything was my niece's mom and her dad, Marla and Kelvin. And I remember the night that I got the news. I went home. It was a Wednesday night. We just had a group mentoring session where the topic was trauma and PTSD. I went home feeling good about it, got in bed early, and I probably woke up around 12 or 12:30. And I usually will look at my phone and see if I got any text or anything. And I looked and I saw a group thread between my family members just saying sorry and just trying to console my brother. And I picked up the phone and I called my cousin and I asked what happened. And she told me that my niece was gunned down by a guy that she was dating. And this is a young man I had met, that accompanied my niece to the prom. I met him. I took pictures with him. And he was a young man that I never thought capable of doing something like this. But, even in this situation, it points to why the work that I do is so important, because when you're a young man and you're estranged from your family and you have no other support system, you cling to whatever it is that gave you a sense of hope and meaning. And for this young man, that was my niece. So in losing her, he felt like he had lost everything. And that was enough for him to do what he did. And I remember that night going to the hospital, just kind of sitting with my brother, and just waiting for some answers. And then after we left the hospital, we went to the home where it happened. And, my niece's mom is there. And we just sat outside as CSI was doing their investigation. And I remember, after crime scene investigation, people had left. Most people wouldn't be able to go back to their home knowing that their daughter's life was just taken in that home. But I watched my niece's mom, Marla, go back into the house, clean up the blood off the floor, and made her house a home again. And after I went home, and a few hours later, I came back wanting to just console her and be there for her and my brother. And when I knocked on her door, she answered, and I just broke down. And she hugged me and she held me and she told me to get it all out. And that moment, I'm like, man, she just lost her daughter. And here she is holding space for other people. And that meant so much to me, because it meant like if she isn't devastated, right? Because you think when someone does something like that, there's a secondary effect that they intended to have, and that is devastation, right? And that she wouldn't let him have that, it told me how I needed to respond to this situation. And it was her light in that moment. It was my brother's strength in that moment that took something that was so tragic and so devastating and made it a rallying point, a point that to this day and that will go on forward will be something that we'll use to help young women going through similar situations, young men who feel just as lost. Like my niece's impact, I've talked to so many young people, so many young women. I've intervened in things where I said to young women, look, on social media, I wasn't able to be there for my niece to help her, but if you are going through anything like this, reach out. And since then, there have been many young women that I've been able to help, connect them with mental health people, follow up with law enforcement to advocate on their behalf, young men that are having trouble processing, bringing them into our program. And we have many more plans to turn this tragic situation into something that gives hope and something that gives life. And then another thing that kind of that my niece's mom said, she said that Kelby lived as if she knows she didn't have long. Like she didn't waste time. Like every picture you will ever see of her, she's smiling. She was such an industrious young woman. Like she was a go-getter, you know, when she was after she finished school, she could have went away to college, but she decided to stay, do her first year at Palm Beach State so that she could work on skills that she could use to pay her way through college. She was a makeup artist. She did hair. And I had opened the letter after everything had happened. We were at her house, her security license at home. So she was just that kind of person that like she didn't hold grudges. She didn't linger on negativity. She just lived life to the fullest. And there are so many adults today that I know that didn't get as much out of life as my niece did. So the one thing that we all hope when we leave this earth is that our story and what we were about, what we represented, impacts someone positively. And she did that. And as her family, it's our job to carry that torch forward and make sure that she's not remembered for the tragedy, right? We can't control how we die. So we won't remember her for how she died. We will honor her. Her legacy will continue because of how she lived. So I think it's those things and the fact that, you know, she's with us, she's gone the way we all must go. It's that mentality that gives me strength and that helps me carry forward and hope as opposed to devastation.
No, I think another piece of this that I often think about as a white guy is I've never felt from you, and it may be passive and I just don't know, coming from an environment that has a lot of systemic history, let's just call it that, right? Of lack of access or disadvantage or whatever it is. It's been planned by many in the past. It's slowly being worked on, but you know, there's often this sense sometimes in the Black community where they have programs, but it's like, we're going to help ourselves. You're the white guy, right? Like, and you somehow, and I admire this greatly, right? You sit at the table with anyone that wants to help you. You do it strategically, but there's never a sense of like only Black people can help us out, right? We're a Black people organization. We don't, you know, and so how do you negotiate that tension, right? Because it's real, right? The anger is real, the oppression is real, the systemic issues are real, but you're like, you seem to be like, yes, that's all there, but all white people aren't here to oppress us, right? There are many that want to help me out.
Right.
So if you could kind of share that side of it, right? The sticky side that in our culture now, it's, you know, like, that's a reality, right? I'm just calling out the elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
So how do you walk through that?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing I had to come to terms with is that I didn't create the dynamics that define life in my community, right? It was here before I got here. You know, my job is to figure out what I can do to positively impact that, right? Another thing is to realize, right, is through empathy, right? If I can't say that I would make any decision different than most white people who are ignorant of the situation, right? We all want to enjoy our lives to the fullest. So I think me kind of reminding people like, look, man, I didn't create this. You probably didn't create this, but you in some way benefit from it. Like, how can we come together, right? Like, there are people who are crazy patriotic, right? And I don't think there's anyone more patriotic than me, right? And saying that, I think that the fact that we have communities of color throughout this country that have just been left behind, under-resourced, underfunded, it's a stain on any patriot, anybody that believes it's a stain that shouldn't exist in 2024. It's 2024, and we're still dealing with the legacy of slavery. You know what I'm saying? And so I think my thing is, right, because even when you look back to abolitionists and things like that, there were white people, right? I don't think we would have been free if there wasn't white people. So at every step of the struggle, rather from abolitionists to the civil rights struggle, you always had white people who understood how they benefited from the position, and they saw the moral calamity and they stood against it, right? So when we get into this place of they can't be involved, we cripple the movement, right? I didn't create this, right? So I'm not going to be able to fix it alone. And you know my motto that real change happens when the people who need it lead it, right? So there is a place for us, right? And it's at the forefront. It's leading this charge. But if we're not doing so in a way where we invite on allies and people who see to some extent what we see, then the change won't be possible, right? Because I don't have the economic base, right, to even fund my work, right? Let alone to create the opportunities for the young men in my program to assail it. I need people who are in positions of privilege to use that privilege to open the door, because that's where the equity will come, right? And not everybody's going to be on that train, right? I don't think we'll live in a world where everybody wants to kumbaya. Let's do what we can to help. But there are so many people that do and that will, and I would be robbing myself of support if I didn't have that mentality. I want to big up a young lady that works with me, white girl from a great middle class family, graduated from the University of Florida, worked at the big law firms. When I met her, she was an attorney at our local government, and she heard about us from an event we did with Rodney Mayo, a peace barbecue rally. And she heard about us. I spoke, and she looked on our website and saw that we needed a grant writer. She knew nothing about writing grants, but she loved to type, right? And she was the type of person that would just sit down and learn it to be of benefit. And for a year, she would just come in on as our grant writer, securing grants for us. And one day I told her, like, I'll never be able to pay you what you make now, right? But if there is any way that you'll be willing to come on and join this team. And she did it, right? She sacrificed all the money she could be making. She sacrificed stability because she believed in what we were trying to do. She knew how she benefited. She understood her position, and she's using it, right? Our organization has the stability it has because someone like her decided to use her advantages in education to become to staff my weakness, to be strong in a place that I'm not strong. So that's the way forward for us, right? It's not an either or, it's a both and. And as an American, it's the way it has to be.
Love it, man.
It's great. I think it is for those of us that have like become more aware of toxic charity, or you and I have both talked about the book When Helping Hurts, and you begin to be a little more sensitive to how you might be perceived in trying to help an issue. What are other ways that people that want to help support what you're doing, white people basically, that want to help support bringing equity and transformation to your community, what are other ways that we could help?
I kind of alluded to it before with kind of Sean, like when he left, just really how the local politics here in West Palm like had changed ever since. Like if I was starting out today and what I'm doing, I think it would have fizzled out. It wouldn't have got support. So, and this is way before all the mass protests and things like that. It was just people, right, who saw a young man trying to address a problem that we all knew was affecting our most disadvantaged residents. And they used their positions of power to open the door, right? Sean did that at every turn of the way, out of the way. Hey, you need space? You can meet here. Hey, we're doing this event. I'd love to have you a part of it. It's really people thinking outside of their own, right? Usually when you're doing something, it's automatic to think of your friends, right? Or your business partners, right? But it's the intentionality of asking, how can I, from where I am, use what I have to benefit this work, right? Because I don't think there is a one size fits all way, right? Not everyone is going to quit their job, is going to and come work for us like Chelsea did, right? But you're going to have some people that are going to be willing to show up and volunteer. Hey, Rick, I'm willing to mentor, but before I mentor, I'd like to be trained in what I can do to not hinder the work or not hinder the empowerment, because there is a way that you can involve yourself in a work that kind of cripples the work, you know. And I've seen it. I've been in the nonprofit industry since I came about. You know, I was always a recipient and of the services, and I know that there's two ways you can do things. One truly empowers people, and one gives the illusion of empowerment, right? But it creates a dependency on those services and those service providers, right? So the end goal of everything we do has to be true empowerment, right? After 1 year of working with a kid, they should be more confident and capable than they were when you met them. Matter of fact, when a young person first comes, we have this motto, free and alive past age 25. When a young person comes into our program at 13, 14, or 15, they are a part of our program until they're 25 years old, right? Mm-hmm. You think that creates a dependency, right? Where you just got these kids that, but what it does, when they first come into the program, they need all the help you can provide, right? Around the clock mentor support, home visits, school visits, whatever it's going to take to stabilize them, meeting their basic needs, you know, going into the homes and kind of de-escalating conflicts and things like that. But after a year or two of a young man being in our program, he moves from a mentee or someone benefiting from the service to actually being a driver, a mentor, using his experiences to mentor younger men in our program, leading our anti-violence workshops, going through the community and engaging, helping us organize events to bring awareness to what we're doing. And not only that, advancing in their own life. Like, the one reason I could never be discouraged, even in the face of the continued gun violence and things happening, is because I've seen young men who come from seemingly impossible situations, far stability, and now live life with a sense of joy, such a love for life, despite everything they've gone through, right? Because like I said, like where you come from doesn't make you less than or weaker than anyone. I tell my young men that what they've gone through makes them more resilient, right? When you come through life in a dysfunctional family and a community of concentrated violence, and you find your inner core, right? And you realize who you are and the power you have, you become unstoppable. That's why when I ran for city commissioner, I remember when I first filled out the paperwork, I was like, what the hell did I just do? They're gonna come at me. This city, this is a different game. And then I remember, bro, I've been shot at before. I've been in rooms where guys wanted to kill me. What are these white people gonna do to me? He can do nothing to me, right? So once our young men realize that, they become a different type of courageous, man, a different kind of focused, a different kind of intentional, right? And then they become equipped to take advantage of the many opportunities and networks that we've been able to build with people who are a different color and from a different socioeconomic status to us. And I think that's the power, bro. That's the power.
You know, as I was saying earlier, you are on the front lines of this, and a lot of people across the country are forming opinions on it from a very safe distance.
Right.
And I think it would be remiss to not ask your opinion on this issue of guns.
Yeah.
Listen, I live in Texas. I grew up white, Christian, Republican, member of the NRA. We owned a ranch. I had a pistol. I had guns. It was our right. And that's what formed my worldview, right? Those problems never really came into my neighborhood. So as somebody that's there, surrounded by this, has impacted you directly. What do you think our next steps as a country are towards a solution on a systemic governmental level?
I will share this, right? Because even looking at this situation, I have to be real about it. We're at where we're at. There are probably more guns in American homes and streets than when people are comfortable admitting. Now, I don't think you're gonna be able to make those guns disappear, right? Part two is the understanding that guns mean different things to different people. I feel like we lose sight of that, right? When we talk about guns, not like there really are kids that grow up in a home where shotguns are there, right? Where their families out shooting and things like that. So they have more of a healthier relationship with the gun, right? Kids in my community, a gun is used for one thing, right? When you grew up in a community like mine where you lack other forms of capital, social capital is everything. Respect is everything. It's worth living and dying for, right? And so a gun to someone in a community like mine is something that will guarantee you that respect, that your entire safety and life in this community is dependent on, right? So when you have guns in the hands of people who it's for that, it's for protecting, it's for exacting revenge and things like that. It kind of it sets the stage, right? Most of violence today, most gun violence today stems from things that used to result in fist fights a few decades ago, right? People would fight over the thing now, right? All the things people would fight about back then are resulting in gunfire now, right? And there are a few what reasons this is, with social media being one of them. I'm sure y'all have probably heard of the website World Star Hip Hop, right? Where if a young person in my community here gets in a fight and loses that fight, and that fight is recorded and it's uploaded to social media or a website like World Star, that young person loses all his respect for the foreseeable future. You know what you can do to guarantee that doesn't happen to you? Oh, I don't fight, I shoot, right? So kids who have access to firearms, and you got to think about it, your brain isn't done developing until you're 25. So you got a kid that doesn't understand consequences of life in general, that has access to a tool that life and death is in that tool. I remember when I was 16, I first got my hand on a gun, and just the power. I felt like Scarface. I felt unstoppable, right? So you add this instrument to a youth who doesn't understand the consequences, where the music, right? We look at the music today, right? And I have a problem with like the music today because it's murder music. When I was growing up, most of the music was about drug dealing, right? So that was the way to make it out in my community, right? So you sell drugs. Now the music is murder music, where you're not hard because you sell drugs anymore. You're hard if you're willing to take a life, right? That is a culture driving, where our young men are constantly being conditioned by this music. And when they find themselves in these situations, they already have the narrative that kind of makes it acceptable to respond in that way. So you take that and the fact that Florida just passed a permitless carry law, right? There was nothing wrong with getting a permit for a gun. At least you know who could rightfully have one and who doesn't. So they repealed that, right, for a more constitutional carry, where now guns are more accessible, right? Because I know guns are more accessible, right? What's the likelihood that someone who is taking their kid into a school or a church and know they can't take their gun into the school or church? I know that there's guns in those cars, right? So now you got teenagers breaking into cars, getting firearms and using them to these ends. So the whole like making guns more accessible is going to make life dangerous for everyone, right? And I feel like it was so anti-common sense to do something like that, right? And believe me, I'm a concealed carry, right? I carry, right? So I'm not anti-gun, right? It's because I was oriented to the gun the right way, right? I know that with the prevalence of gun violence, I know that police are reactive, right? 9 times out of 10, they're not going to get there in time to protect me. I want a measure of safety for myself. But too many of our young people aren't oriented to the gun in the right way. So for me, it's something that we take the proactive stance to do, is orient them to their environment, orient them to their drivers, the influences, the music, and the fact that when they are getting ready to carry out that violence, they're doing it to someone that's just like them, right? And I create a boogeyman, right? Who benefits from you killing someone in your community that looks like you, right? It's all the things that we cry about our past, the racist systems and institutions. So I let our young people know that when they participate, they are a part of the very institutions that made our community what it is today, right? And once they're able to see that way, it changes things, right? And then you kind of where it's like, look, if you like guns and you want guns, there's a legal way to do it. Let's do that, right? Keep your name clean, because if you got a felony, you can't own a gun, right? So that incentivizes them to stay out of trouble if they're serious about wanting to own a gun, right? Once you do, like, take a class. Like, we got guys that are weapons specialists that teach classes, right? Talk to these people, right? We got guys in the military that come home are avid gun collectors, but they don't want to use the gun ever. So so once young people get older and they start to understand these things, it kind of takes the edge off of life. So I think one of the most important things we can do is equip organizations like mine to go into communities where this issue will help reorient these young people. Because I think all the laws being passed, all the discussions and fight, it's up here, but it's not going to reach down here. It's a different world down here, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're not down here in the streets engaging these young people and doing what I'm talking about, you can change every law you want. Outlaw, they're still going to get their hands on them. You're not changing anything. You have to change the heart, and you have to help my entire team is trained in cognitive behavioral theory, where we teach our young people how to process their emotions, right? We teach them to think, feel, do something, right? When you think a certain thought, you feel a certain way, you're more likely to do certain things. Or if you feel a certain way, you're more likely to think a certain way and do something. So when someone disrespects you in the community, right, you're thinking, oh, he tried me, or you feel slighted, and now you think you got to avenge yourself. We teach them tools to break that, right? Because if you follow that cycle, it's going to lead to a path of destruction. So we equip our young people to break that cycle and de-escalate situation themselves, so they don't have a reason to pick up a gun.
Man, no, geez, I love that. I think, there's so much wisdom on the street level sometimes with issues like this, right? For some reason, we always pass it off on leadership, right? Like it's on them to change these things. Right. And it's never going to change, right? Like the reorientation for everyone, right? I mean, the process can be a little bit more difficult depending on the trauma. All these issues really require what you said, right? It's changing perspective. It's reorienting. It's communicating that it's not this, what it is to you isn't what it is to everyone else, right? What triggers you isn't what triggers everyone else. And man, that resonates with me, because you're not just treating symptoms, right? You're a root guy.
Right.
And the plant doesn't change if we don't address the root. And in anything, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but we are such a symptom society. And that's what I love about you. But the issue is it's a slow grow, right?
Yeah.
It's an incremental impact.
Yep.
Right? The tree that you're nurturing, they're like this big right now. And in your life, you won't probably see a lot of the fruit of what you're doing, right? You're planting a lot right now.
Yep.
You're overturning dead soil. You're making it new again. I mean, that's the hard work, man. That is the hard work.
Yep. We like those easy and those big, like we like, this legislation. And I'm not against that, right?
Sure,
one of my biggest funders is Every Town for Gun Safety. They do a lot of legislative work and things like that. And all that is great. I support it.
Sure.
But it doesn't change the fact that, like, with a young man, like, you have to teach them, like, what a word. Like, someone can come up to me right now and call me the N word and say whatever they want to say, right? I'm above that. Like, who are you, right? And so once you teach young people that, like, if you're really tough, you're not reacting to words, right?
Right.
You have the maturity and the manhood about you to not let someone that doesn't know you, like, dictate what your next move is going to be, right? And so I like to see our work in the next few years or decades become more of a societal push happening in communities like ours that has that that social awareness campaign, where we're eventually getting artists to be conscious about the music that they're putting out, because it's all a feeder.
It's awesome, Ricky. As we wrap up, I would love to hear from you one of your favorite stories from the work you've done. I know that it's not, you have as many or more stories of disappointments and frustrations, investing in young men and seeing them go do the opposite in a way that's detrimental to their own lives. But I know you also see some amazing things. And would you just share one of those with us as we wrap things up here?
Absolutely. There's a young man named Henry, and Henry was referred to us by a friend that I know who represents youth that have charges. He's not a public defender, but someone that represents youth when there's a conflict of interest with a public defender. But she referred this kid to our program, Henry, and it was a gun charge, and he was looking at some serious time. But whenever I go in and speak, I try to give the kid a second chance if they never had it. So she called me in to speak on behalf of this kid, and I did. So instead of sending this kid away, she ordered this young man to our program, right? And so within the first few weeks, we're getting to know the kid. He's displaced. So one of the things we work to do is stabilize his living situation, helping him find housing. And then whenever a kid first comes in, that they don't trust you, right? And most adults expect kids to trust them because they're adults, but we don't expect that, right? I know what these kids have gone through. So I tell my team at zero, win their trust. And the number one way you win their trust is by meeting those personal needs they may have and showing up and showing a level of commitment that is unnormal, unusual to them, right? So after a few weeks, he'd come and he wouldn't share much. He was a quiet kid, and sometimes he'd fall out of the fold. We have this model called relentless engagement, where if a kid falls out, we don't let him go. We go after him. We're going to show up at your school, your block, your home, wherever we can find you. And we just relentlessly engage them, right? And so fast forward to the day, right? This kid not only is doing well in school, I think he's in his 11th grade now. He's doing well in school. When I tell you he is our number one recruiter, his friends that he used to hang out with and get in trouble with are in our program. His younger brother that was in and out of jail is now in our program. And when we're in our mentoring sessions, right, to see him speak about how he was when he first came in, he sounds like an older man. He's like, I remember when I was younger, when I was like you guys, I came in, I wasn't really taking serious what Rick and Norm them were saying, but y'all boys need to tighten up and listen, and just sharing his story. And he just has what we want to create. We want to take those insecurities that they have and turn them into strengths. But this kid is a lion now. And I have no doubt that within a few years, he either be on staff or leading this work, right? There's another young man I like to bring up. His name is Kaji. And Kaji has some developmental issues. So his time in school was it was hard, lots of behavioral issues, right? Every day his mom's getting calls home, right? So our first few months with him was just showing up. Every time the school called, just showing up and filling in for his mom. Whenever his mom was at what's end, she calls us, and we come to the home. We were like a father figure for him, and just constant redirection, accountability, keeping him in the fold, right? This is a young man that none of his teachers thought he would graduate, and let alone become anything productive. He was probably one of our most challenging cases, right? Fast forward to the day, he's finished school, and now he's working construction, taking extra jobs at Wawa, working on getting a security license, and is a contributing member of our society. This is a young man that should have been in prison. He's the type, but he's not. He's coming to group whenever he's off work and sharing his time, helping to guide our younger mentees. And today, after this, I'm getting ready to go meet with a kid that's 12 years old. 12 years old. This kid is known for participating in the gun violence in our community. His mom has 10 kids. This kid is probably one of the most heartbreaking cases that I've ever seen. Going and sitting and talking with his mom, knowing that we don't have the impact on this kid that we need to have. His life is over before it starts, right? But I know that what we do is so effective that I'm excited, right? I got to sit with the young man a few days ago, ask him what he was interested in, what are some of the things we need. We set up a day to go eat Chick-fil-A and talk about going to get his ID and get some of those things we know we need to win his trust. But if not for this organization, a young man like the ones I described, a young man who's newer to our work, but that I have high hopes will be one of our biggest success stories. These kids don't have a chance unless people like the people that I've hired, the Norman, the Davids, the Mavis, Shakoya, the Nays, aren't seeing or having a deep sense of purpose, a sense of calling, a sense of mission to this work. So when I see rough cases like this, it used to be disheartening because there was no chance. But because my organization has the resources that it needs to impact, this kid has the same amount of hope as the two young men I described before. And that's what we're about. We're about going into a hopeless situation and planting a seed of hope that'll deal hope to our community, the generations to come.
That's great, man. How can people help you? Give a shout out to where people can find you and what they can do to help you out.
Absolutely. If you're on social media, go over to our page, Inner City Innovators, or if you're a website person, go to our website, www.innercityinnovators.org. And one of our biggest needs, man, is monthly subscribers, people who are donating at a monthly basis, right? It's my dream that we'll have so many people in our community and even without that are so concerned about the issue of gun violence that they're willing to donate a cup of coffee a week on a monthly basis to our organization to decrease our dependency on grants, right? Because think about it, right? If you can't actively go into a community like mine and work to end gun violence, it'll feel really good that when you're watching the news and you're seeing something tragic happen, you know that you're putting your money where your mouth is. So when you open your mouth to speak on this issue, you're not a person just talking, but you're contributing to solutions. So that's first and foremost a place that I would tell people they could really help us, because our work doesn't exist without people who are socioeconomically secure supporting our work. My entire team is from the situation that we're from, with the exception of my administrative team. And so when you donate to our organization, it's not just going towards the kids and the impact we're making there, but you're paying people who are from these communities to make a difference in their community. And to me, that there's no better way to get the most on your investment.
Ricky, man, it's been good to hear it. Even though I've known you for a while, it gets me fired up every time. It's really impactful. I think sometimes we get so caught up in our narratives, in our worlds, that hope can seem like someone else's initiative, not ours, right? But your story is one that hopefully can ignite just a desire for people to open their eyes. I think it's easy, right, when we're not affected daily by this. And social media, it tends to overwhelm you with a lot of negative images, which makes you more numb, right? It actually, I think it almost has the opposite effect, because we see so much now in 30-second bites that we just have to tune out. But when there are people like you in our communities, I hope we all can get behind them and really affect the change in ways that need to happen. So I appreciate you taking the time, man. I appreciate you coming on here and catching up. I applaud you. And for all you out there, please listen and help how you can. We would appreciate that. So for John, this has been Sean. Thank you for listening to The Known Experience. We hope you continue to experience being known in your life and to have the curiosity to know others. So until next time, we'll see you guys.